Hey guys, it's God Bars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 75th episode of my series where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it had, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. So with the last 80s album that I'm talking about for the time being, I thought it would be pretty criminal to go through 10 Golden Age classics and not have the Beastie Boys as at least one of them. The album we're going to discuss today, Paul's Boutique, wasn't the first successful album that they had under their belt, and it definitely wouldn't be the last, but it's debatably the most influential and imaginative album in the trio's entire discography. This album is so universal and impactful that even my dad, who despises hip hop, has brought up Paul's Boutique by name, and when I mentioned that I was going to be reviewing it, he said that he loves this album, which is without a doubt the only piece of rap music he's ever used that word for. I think this was probably partially related to their expressive voices. We both enjoy Rage Against the Machine a lot, and personally, I think despite the genre difference, there's an undeniable vocal similarity between Zach De La Roca and MCA Ad Rock and Mike D. Another aspect he couldn't deny was the complex and futuristic treatment of chops and sounds, which challenged the notion that hip hop was only repetitive, boring four-bar loops backed by lazy sampling. It's a great early example of how sampling can bring together different worlds of sounds that either wouldn't or couldn't be paired together otherwise. When it came to rock music, they weren't alone either, because Run DMC technically claimed the title of King of Rock back in 1985 and still hadn't abandoned that part of their identity. And even rappers over here in California like Ice-T were no stranger to rapping over heavy guitars. But Beastie Boys pushed the bounds of creativity with their second album, and while Run DMC also popularized the practice of finishing your partner's rhyme, the way Mike, Ad Rock, and MCA would switch off and finish each other's lines is the type of thing that can really only come from chemistry and practice. It's kind of a lost art form that I can't really think of hearing anyone do in modern hip hop, but I never get tired of hearing Beastie Boys trade flows off. If anything, that makes it stick out even more, and by proxy, I at least think of it as a defining characteristic of their music, and they're usually the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear anything about the lost art of you and your crew member finishing off each other's bar. The charisma and energy between all three is so strong that for me they're up there with my favorite trios of all time, just some of which include Flatbush Zombies, De La Soul, Cypress Hill, Ghetto Boys, The Lox, The Fugees, Company Flow, Diggable Planets, Little Brother, and of course Black Moon. The extensive use of samples allows them to touch on a myriad of different themes and ideas, and this method of chopping up material into a collage of sound would help set the blueprint for future pioneers of production like DJ Shadow, The Avalanches, and of course Jay Dilla. There's moments that have the kind of muddy, chugging guitars you'd find on a heavy metal song, but on a track like the second song here, the pace is a bit quicker and geared for a party, and it's accompanied by a fat, groovy bass line. There's also some fun skits that may not be quite as fleshed out and conceptual as the sketches Prince Paul did for De La Soul's debut that same year, but they were still pretty ahead of their time in that aspect too. Beastie Boys also did more than their fair share of putting newer artists on, from having Dr. Dre as a DJ on their License to Ill tour years before the formation of NWA, to helping some of hip hop's biggest stars like LL Cool J find their footing. You can't give Beastie Boys all 100% of the credit though, because while it's bone dry on the feature side of things, the production saw assistance from Easy Mike and King Gizmo of Dust Brothers. They really cover a lot of ground across these 53 minutes and provide a snapshot of late 80s hip hop in New York, even though the album was actually recorded in LA over a 2 year span. They also use all sorts of percussion to build these syncopated rhythms, and the way the drums on here are programmed and mixed is immaculate and really forward thinking. When you take any album that was prominent around this time and put it next to this LP in terms of how they've aged and held up today, 9 out of 10 times Paul's Boutique is the more dynamic album. This is all despite the fact they didn't have the help they previously had in the form of Rick Rubin, and many dismissing them as one album wonders. They actually ended up selling more with License to Ill than this follow-up, but the latter is the one that really found a place amongst hip-hop fans and b-boys. Honestly, it isn't that surprising that they couldn't outsell their debut, considering it had monster tracks like Fight for Your Right, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Paul Revere, and Brass Monkey. While some of their later work to come out in the 90s might sound a little more fresh in terms of the general sound and rapping style, it's hard to deny that Paul's Boutique is practically the definition of a magnum opus. For honorable mentions in terms of favorite songs from this album, I'd have to name Johnny Royale, Eggman, High Plains Drifter, The Sounds of Science, Car Thief, and Shod Rock. My overall three favorite tracks would have to be Shake Your Rump, Hey Ladies, and Looking Down the Barrel of a Gun. Thank you for watching my 75th video. Next time, we're going to go back to the 2000s, and I'm actually going to do 15 albums for that group just because there's so many classics from that time period. So keep an eye out for that one, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite songs are off of this amazing sophomore album. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Alright.